Welcome to Zelda's Peaches and Biscuits podcast. I'm Elena Doughton, the Executive Director of the Fitzgerald Museum, and I'm joined with my co-host,
Maura Martello. I'm here as a docent at the museum, as well as being a Zelda researcher and a huge fan of Zelda Fitzgerald.
We had the great honor last night of attending the Alabama Writers Hall of Fame, and since it was and Zelda's induction into the Alabama Writers Hall of Fame, and we thought that we would give you a recap of that evening as a special podcast. What was your impression of the evening?
Well, it was the first time I was to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm from New York originally, so Elena drove me up, and a very good driver she turned out to be. And I thought it was just a thrilling event for anybody who is a Fitzgerald fan. It was just a thrill. I got to meet one of the children of Scotty. His name is Samuel Jackson Lanahan.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know his middle name, yeah.
Yes, I think it's the same name as his father, who was Samuel Jackson Lanahan. And I thought he was a very charming individual. Reminded me a little of Scotty, maybe physically, maybe a little of Fitzgerald. And we also met his children, Michael and Sayre. Of course, the family name of Zelda being Sayre.
Yeah.
And now the older son, Michael, was kind of a dead ringer for F. Scott Fitzgerald, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. It was interesting because you only see the Fitzgeralds in black and white photos, and then to see someone that
burst
really,
into color.
Yeah, yes, it was like, wow, that's what he probably looked like. Yes,
yes.
They were. You got a sense
kind of a sunflower look.
Yes,
you know?
I mean, he was taller probably than Scott was in real life, but looks very much like him. You can, if you haven't, it's on our Instagram, and also Sam Lanahan. I thought he favored his mother, Scotty.
Yes.
In and around Montgomery, there's quite a number of people that knew her that still live in the neighborhood. Scotty lived here in the Old Cloverdale neighborhood until her death in '86, and everyone talks about how charming she was. People talk about how charming Scott could be, Zelda obviously. And I think we got a taste of that because Sam Lanahan was rather charming.
Yes, he was. He had a great laugh. He threw his head back quite a few times. And he seemed to be very interested in the life and career of Judge Sayre, Zelda's father. And he was talking to us a little bit. We did crash a party. We should talk about that.
We didn't crash. Well, I don't know if it was a party. We crashed the author's room.
Okay.
So when we arrived, we parked. We got there a little early. We did drive through campus, parked, got there, and it was at the Bryant Convention Center at University of Alabama. And we asked, where should we go? And the receptionist at the conference hall said, go down the hall, take a right, go in there. So
we did.
We did. And I should say that I had my big flapper headband on, because why wouldn't you if you're going to go to Zelda's induction? So kind of a black tuxedo, headband,
fascinator,
it's
peacock feathers.
Peacock black with some peacock feathers in it, and rhinestone headband, not inconspicuous. And we walk in, everyone kind of looks at us, and it was not a lively room, but there were, little pockets of people. And
speaking
and then one
privately.
lady says, "Are you here for Zelda?" Because, of course. So I said, "Yes, we're here for Zelda." And they, "Oh, you must meet Mr. Lanahan." So we met him and, found he was very charming. I was very nervous to meet the family because I hadn't met anyone, but, was very at ease. He's doing a lot of research on the family, particularly, as you said, Judge Sayre. And he told us some interesting new stories about Judge Sayre. And, eventually the photographer mills through. And then eventually they said, "Oh, will you please be seated?" And they had...
Put you in the front row, as I recall.
Yes, but they had one of those, what are they called, step and repeat backgrounds. You see them at all events. They have the logos behind it. And they had these chairs lined up. And then they lined the people up in this room. And then they asked Mr. Lanahan. He was he was next to last, and finally said, "Oh, will you please sit next to Mr. Lanahan?" And then it hit me. These are all the authors being inducted. So if you want to search us out or search me out, there we are. I'm in the official photo.
I thought you looked very good.
But
in the photo.
but it wasn't entirely crashing because also I have to say Mr. Lanahan was very gracious. He accepted Zelda's medal on her behalf. There were two posthumous, Zelda and Ralph Ellison. He accepted on behalf of his grandmother, and he asked me to go on stage with him. And then after he accepted it, he then presented it to the museum on the family's behalf. So her medal will be here at the Fitzgerald Museum. It will hang in the room where the photos for Zelda's only published novel, Save Me the Waltz. The publicity photos and dust jacket images were taken here in the house at Felder in the East Sunroom. And so that medal will hang in the room that is partially dedicated. Each of our current galleries are a different novel. The East Sunroom is Tender as the Night and Save Me the Waltz because they both worked on those here in the house. But again, those photos were taken in that room. So it'll hang where those photos were taken. So that was a real honor.
That was a very generous.
Yes.
He could have taken it home and put it in a closet and never see the light of day.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He turned it over to the Fitzgerald
Yeah,
Museum.
and
Very generous.
It was very gracious, and we are very happy to have it. So we want to say thank you especially to the Alabama Writers Hall of Fame, which is sponsored by the Alabama Center for the Book and the Alabama Writers Forum. I thought they did a really nice job of that evening.
It was a beautiful event. It was a lovely room. It was decorated beautifully. All of the writers, all Alabama writers, were represented in photographs with their books beautifully displayed on all the dining room tables.
So each table was themed, for example, Zelda had 2 tables. Sam Lanahan had sponsored 1 table, and we were at the second Fitzgerald table. So when you walked in, and you can see these images, we'll put them up on I think they're already on the Fitzgerald Instagram. But when you walked in, there was a really beautiful table with a mannequin, kind of a 20s style, and it had a typewriter. Those spaces can be I find they can be very impersonal, but big conference hall. But it was quite beautiful. It was very well done.
Obviously, Zelda being the main attraction. I mean, there were other authors being represented, but only one had this huge display table as soon as you walked in of 1920s jazz age memorabilia type ornamentation.
The other inductees will...
A shout out to them.
Yes, to them. The first was Mark Childress. Some of his works were Crazy in Alabama, Tender, V for Victor, Georgia Bottoms. He was the first inducted in the night, and he talked about as a young man, he had written, I guess as a student, a play about Scott and Zelda, and particularly about Zelda. And so it was really touching to see that he was very moved that he was being inducted with her. So you can kind of see the...
and he kept referring to her as Miss Zelda.
Yes, Miss Zelda.
Which made her suddenly burst into reality for me anyway. Yeah. She was no longer somebody on a page of Nancy Milford's, but was a real and true Southern woman.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the difference that people in Alabama really regard her as this kind of extended family member, I think you got a sense of that there.
Yes. A neighbor.
Yes. The second inducted was Ralph Ellison, and he was the first of the 2 posthumous. You probably know, hopefully, Invisible Man and then Juneteenth. I didn't know his connection to Alabama, but I think it was that he was at Tuskegee. They were representing him and his time and the influence that Tuskegee had on his writing career. Third was Zelda. You'll see on our Instagram, they also, with each inductee, had a really beautiful video. Those were very well done. It was a very large screen. With a lot of them, there was audio. I guess, I mean, there's no known audio of Zelda, but they did these short movies and
Interviews.
yeah, interviews. But I thought overall hers was good.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It was mostly gorgeous photos of Zelda.
Yeah. The third was Faye Gibbons. She is a children's writer or does children's book, and I think is one of the first two children's writers to be inducted. On the night, they asked that the speakers kind of do like a 2-minute little speech. And I don't know how long hers went, but she was so delightful, no one cared.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend checking her out. She just had these lovely stories, and to me was probably the most Southern. It's interesting that even I don't have that much of a Southern accent, but you could see the younger inductees all had more, they didn't have the old traditional Southern accents, which I think we're losing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've discussed that. Maybe we can discuss it in another episode.
Yeah. The next was Carolyn Haynes. Some of her works was Skin Dancer, Sarah Booth short stories. She was very interesting in that she also has a 501c3 for an animal, horse, and I think dog rescue.
Yes, several animals.
Yeah.
Animal groups, yeah.
And she, very beautiful lady, but I found interesting, there wasn't uniformity of dress. I thought it was going to be a little more
formal.
Yeah, I was a little worried because I didn't know if it was going to be more formal or casual, so I kind of had like a tuxedo suit, but I knew that I was probably going to be on stage. But I was impressed with her that she was just in her jeans. I mean, to be inducted.
Well, she's a farm woman.
Oh, I know, but I mean, she represented herself well.
Yeah.
I just found the diversity of the evening very interesting, or also delightful too. That each of the authors were very distinct. That a lot of different voices, a lot of different perspectives were represented in the inductees.
Yeah.
The next is Honorée Fanon Jeffers. She is a poet. I didn't know her before this evening. I think she is a graduate of the University of Alabama, but she has Red Clay Suite, The Gospel of Barbecue, Outlandish Blues, and The Glory Gets. So I'm going to be checking her out. Hers seemed very interesting. Someone accepted on her behalf, but I thought her presentation was very interesting. Most of the authors I already knew. I didn't. She and the children's story. And then the final was Michael Knight. He did The Typist, which I've known because it's set in Japan. Dogfight and Other Stories, The Divining Rod, Evening Land. He was very funny. He was the last, and when he got up to give his speech, he said that he would keep it short because he had to go pee, which made everyone laugh because it kind of broke the
solemnity.
Yes,
I
was about to say, yes, the solemnity. But and then someone at the table in front of us laughed and goes, "See, I was right." So I thought it was a delightful evening. A lot of times, these evenings can be kind of staid, kind of impersonal.
Even the food was good, which is very rare.
Yeah, it was it was
filet mignon or tenderloin, as it's now called.
Yes, it was very good.
Yeah, it was very.
And they
good.
had great
Very
desserts.
hungry.
I grew up back and forth between Alabama and Florida, and the key lime pie was real key lime pie. I found it an unusual choice because I don't normally associate key lime pie with Alabama, but it's probably Publix. But you can't go wrong with Publix key lime pie. And then I had a chocolate pie too.
Yes, somebody swiped that from me.
Yes. So overall, it was a beautiful evening. It was an honor to be there. It was an honor to, even though
Do you think we can put up some photos later on?
Yes, we will. When this episode goes out, we will also put them. Check out our Instagram. It's Zelda's Peaches and Biscuits. We do now have a Facebook group, so we'll post to it as well. It is a private group, but please join. And so if you have any questions, as we begin to move forward with the regular podcast, join our group if you have any questions there, or you can email us at zeldaspeachesandbiscuits@gmail.com. Again, there is a Zelda's Peaches and Biscuits Facebook group. You can probably find it, go to just the Fitzgerald Museum's Facebook group and click through. And I don't know, I guess that's it for today. Stay safe and be well.